We bring you live pics. They're coming to you from Canada, where the President, Donald Trump, is departing the G7 summit. You can see there it's ready to take off. We just saw the President jumping into that chopper, and he'll be taking off momentarily. Here at home, the government has been playing down the significance of Donald Trump's sudden exit from the G7. Let's bring in Trudy McIntosh. Trudy, as we wait for those live pictures to show us Donald Trump heading back to Washington, D.C., tell us, what does this mean for Australia and our Prime Minister? When are they likely to have this much-fated meeting?
Yeah, it was a shock, wasn't it, when it was announced by the White House press secretary today that Donald Trump, after dinner, would be leaving, and that's what we are seeing right now on our screens from Canada. Donald Trump had only been on the ground for little more than a day, and he's now headed back to the American capital to be there at the White House at what is a crucial time in the Middle East. There is a lot of moving pieces in this conflict between Israel and Iran. The question mark as to whether the United States is at all willing to be involved in any sort of further strikes on Iranian targets, in particular those crucial nuclear sites. The US president will be weighing that up as he makes the trip now back to the United States. He had met alongside Keir Starmer, the UK Prime Minister, today. The Canadian Prime Minister held talks. He is obviously the chair of the G7, given it is meeting in Canada today. As for our Prime Minister, he had been waiting for day 2 of this summit before, as Australia is only a partner to the G7, we are not a formal member. Therefore, our meetings had been slated for the next day. Anthony Albanese now one of a number of countries that will not get FaceTime with the US president. That's not to say we won't see a meeting down the track sometime later this year. The acting Prime Minister, Richard Marles, has said in the not too distant future, in his words, there will be a face-to-face meeting, a potential option in September, if the Prime Minister wants to fly back to the United States, go to the White House and have a formal meeting ahead of the UN Leaders Week, which is often somewhere that Australian Prime Ministers go. This was the acting Prime Minister, Richard Marles, downplaying the significance of the lack of FaceTime at this G7.
Completely understandable that the US President would be returning to Washington, D.C. to deal with that. We shouldn't be reading more into it than that. This is essentially the American President needing to deal with what is obviously playing out in the world today. We have seen our Prime Minister and the President have a number of phone calls to date. They are building a rapport. We've been able to deal with our issues with the United States. I'm sure that in the not too distant future they will meet face to face. But
there has been a bit of domestic point scoring going on today as to whether enough has been done since Donald Trump was re-elected to ensure that there was a relationship between the two leaders of the two countries. There has been these series of phone calls, as we heard Richard Marles point to there, but the opposition believes more should have been done proactively. This is the statement from opposition leader Susan Lee. She says it's disappointing to hear that the Prime Minister will not have the opportunity to meet President Trump. This decision is understandable, but to the detriment of Australia. The Prime Minister should have been more proactive in seeking to strengthen this relationship. So that is the politics of a meeting that now will not take place as Donald Trump flies back home. There are shockwaves around the globe from this conflict in the Middle East, not only the geopolitical consequences, but crucially what's happening in the global economy. A spike in the oil price. Treasurer Chalmers warning today it is likely to lead to higher prices at the petrol pump for Australian motorists. He believes it'll be volatility for now rather than a prolonged increase in prices.
We're seeing mostly volatility in the oil price. We're seeing the gold price shoot up because that's where people invest when times are uncertain. And so what that means for us is the potential of higher petrol prices. It usually takes a couple of weeks before the international barrel price reaches the Bowser price in the suburbs and towns of Australia.
But don't expect a repeat of a cut to the fuel excise. We saw that in 2022, the start of the Ukraine war, that saw the then Morrison government slash the fuel excise in order to try and bring down that high petrol price here at home. Treasurer Chalmers telling our colleague Kieran Gilbert today, Ash, that at this stage they're not contemplating that. They believe there are other ways to provide cost of living support.